All right, today we are diving into a document called the NextLink Operating Manual. And look, this thing proposes a total rewrite of reality. It says our maps, our history, and our power structures are all deliberately inverted. So let's get right into its pretty radical audit of the Southern African Meridian.
So right at the start, the manual just throws this massive challenge at you. What if everything you've ever been told is inverted? What if our maps are actually upside down? And what if the real flow of power has been hidden from us on purpose? I mean, that's a huge premise, so let's start to unpack it.
Okay, so where do we even begin? The manual says we have to start at what it calls the true top of the world, Southern Africa. It makes this claim that this whole region is basically the source code, the origin point for the entire planetary system it's about to lay out for us.
And right away, this just completely reframes your whole perspective. Think about it. We're all taught north is up, but the manual claims this is a psychological trick designed to make the South seem subordinate. It argues that if you look at the actual topography, the South is the high ground, it's the real zenith, and everything else literally flows down from there. So at the very heart of this zenith, there's a specific site the manual identifies as the Rock of Aset. And this detail? It's absolutely crucial. Aset isn't just some random name. It literally translates to the throne. This is the seat of power. And get this, the Greeks later renamed it Isis, which the manual claims was a deliberate move to disconnect the whole concept of the throne from its actual physical location on Southern African soil. But here's the kicker. The manual argues this isn't just a symbolic throne. No, it's a functioning piezoelectric power station. It claims the rocks there, dolerite and quartz, are actually converting the planet's immense pressure and the sunlight hitting them into a physical electrical charge. We're talking about the source engine of the entire planet.
And the Nile River? That's used as the perfect, tangible example of this idea. It doesn't flow up the map, right? It flows down from the Southern Highlands, the source, all the way to the northern outlet. And the manual says that's exactly how planetary energy works too, flowing out from this massive southern battery.
Okay, but a power station is pretty useless if you don't have a grid to distribute the energy. So how was all this charge managed and broadcast across the planet? Well, let's get into the manual's description of an ancient planetary grid and the architects who built it.
This is where things get really interesting with the language. The manual draws a direct line between angels and angles. It says an angel isn't a being with wings. It's a messenger of light, which is basically a frequency transmission. And an angle? Well, that's just the geometric degree where that frequency hits the Earth.
So these ancient architects, the manual calls them the Watchers, are said to have arrived at a very, very specific coordinate, 33.3 degrees north, 33.3 degrees east. And they supposedly brought base 60 mathematics with them, the system we still use for time and for circles, and used it to engineer this whole planetary grid.
And using this geometry, they built amplifiers. Great Zimbabwe is the prime example. The manual is super clear on this. These are not ruins. It's a lithic or stone step-up transformer. That conical tower? It's identified as a perfectly tuned golden ratio antenna built specifically to broadcast the piezoelectric charge coming right out of the soil.
So who was guarding all this incredible technology? The manual points to the famous Zimbabwe birds. But you gotta look closely at their feet. They're human. This is supposed to be the sovereign mask, a symbol for a human being who had totally mastered the high-altitude frequency of the southern zenith and could actually manage all this planetary energy.
Okay, and this is where the story, it takes a really dark turn. The manual details something called the Great Harvest, which is basically the unplugging of this ancient power source. The argument is that this system wasn't just lost to time, it was deliberately co-opted.
So according to this text, the Watchers' ancient blueprint was kept hidden away in secret archives, like the ones at the Vatican. And then, figures like Cecil Rhodes and companies like Anglo-American apparently used these maps to pinpoint the South's battery. They knew that gold was the ultimate conductor for this energy, and they just started pulling it out of the ground on an industrial scale. So listen, the crucial point here is that this wasn't just about getting rich. Not at all. From the manual's point of view, this was a deliberate act of energetic warfare. By taking the gold, they weren't just mining. They were literally, physically unplugging the southern power station and creating what it calls an energetic void.
So where did all that power go? Well, the manual claims they moved the broadcasting cap Think of the gold capstone on the Great Pyramid and moved it to the Vatican. So now, St. Peter's Basilica, which is lined with all this southern gold, acts as the new hub. It works like a Faraday cage and a frequency switchboard, basically hijacking the Earth's natural grid to send out a new, controlled signal.
Okay, so if you've managed to physically hijack the planet's hardware, how do you stop everyone from noticing? This brings us to what the manual calls the software of the mind, the control system that supposedly operates right under our noses. And the manual asks the big question, right? If a system this massive really exists, how is it maintained day to day without anybody realizing it? The answer, it claims, is baked right into the language we speak and the legal systems we're all a part of.
And it says the answer is hidden in plain sight in the etymology of a word we use every day, government. It breaks it down to its Latin roots, gubernare, which means to steer, and mentis, which means the mind. So according to the manual, its literal translation is mind control, a system designed to steer our collective consciousness. And this control, the manual argues, is enforced by a really clever legal switcheroo, moving us from the law of the land to maritime law, the law of the sea. And under this system, people are treated as vessels. It's a neat trick that allows your energy to be salvaged through things like debt, using currency or liquid assets to keep you afloat in their system. But the ultimate target, according to this manual, is your own personal receiver, your pineal gland. It's shaped like a pine cone, and it actually contains piezoelectric crystals, which basically makes it a biological antenna. And that giant pine cone statue in the Vatican courtyard, the manual presents that as a symbolic trophy, a boast that they have control over our internal hardware. So wow, if that's the problem, a hijacked planetary grid controlling us through mind software, then what's the solution? Well, the manual actually provides a protocol for taking back your own frequency, and it uses a very old legend to explain how to do it. It's called the King Arthur Protocol. Now, in this story, the dragon or the serpent isn't some evil monster. It represents the wild, serpentine ley line energy of the earth. And the sword, Excalibur, that represents the right angle, a perfect 90-degree alignment. So you don't kill the dragon, you strike it to ground its energy. You pin that chaotic, maritime frequency back to the stability of the land. You square the circle. And this brings us right to the manual's final declaration. It's a statement of personal sovereignty. It's all about making that conscious shift from being a passive vessel tossed around on a controlled frequency to becoming the head of the dragon, the master of your own grounded energy. I mean, what a fascinating and seriously challenging way to reimagine our place in the world.